Okay, in this video, I'm going to walk you through count them, four valid forms of reasoning. Okay, so I'm going to show you four basic argument forms that are always going to be valid, that you can use, that are going to make your essays better, that are going to make your thinking better, that you can notice other people doing. Okay, so these are just four solid argument forms. And with those, I'm going to show you three invalid forms, okay, that are tricky, that look like they should be valid, but they're not, okay? So you can watch out for those. You can avoid doing it in your own writing, and you can notice when other people are doing it to kind of play a trick on you, okay? So that's what this video is going to do, all right? So without further ado, let's get to it. All right, so these are some common argument forms. We're going to show you some valid ones and some invalid ones. All right, so let's get started. Here's the first valid form. It's called affirming the antecedent or modus ponens. Okay, you might be familiar with this one already. If P, then Q. That's what we call a conditional statement. A conditional statement is always made up of two things, a P, or an antecedent, and a Q, or a consequent. We'll get to that in a second. Right? Affirming the antecedent just means saying P. P is true, right? So if P then Q, P is true, therefore Q, all right? So that's always going to be a valid form of reasoning. See, watch this. If Wally's had a beer, you better watch out. Wally's had a beer, therefore you better watch out. See, here we got the antecedent, Wally's had a beer, and the consequent, you better watch out. We affirm the antecedent. We say, well, he has had a beer. Therefore, you better watch out, okay? That's always going to be valid. If this one's true and this one's true, this one is going to have to be true, okay? I cannot tell you how often I use this form of argument in writing my essays, right? Like, if you want to write an essay, all you need to do is first provide a whole bunch of evidence why a certain conditional is true, right? That's first half of your essay. Then you provide evidence that, the antecedent is true. That's the second part of your essay. And then you can conclude this, right? So, yeah, it's a super powerful little tool. It looks simple, right? And this is a very simple form of it, but you can kind of expand it and turn each premise into a kind of intermediate conclusion and argue for that, right? And then you get a really solid, powerful, longer argument, okay? So I think this is like one of the most simple forms of argumentation, the simplest valid syllogism out there, but it is so useful, okay? So learn this one. Notice it when other people make it, because other people use this all the time too, okay? Now, here's another one. It's working with conditional statements. This one's called denying the consequent, or modus tollens if you're Latin. Okay, so if P then Q, again, we get the antecedent, we get the consequent. So then we deny the consequent. We say not Q, therefore not P. Okay, so this one's always going to be valid. So you watch out. If Wally's had a beer, you better watch out. You don't need to watch out. So Wally has not had a beer. See? Because if Wally had a beer, you'd probably have to watch out, but you don't have to, right? Sure, there's lots of other reasons you might want to watch out, but you don't have to right now. So you know that Wally hasn't had a beer, okay? So if it's true that you don't have to watch out, and it's true that if Wally's had a beer, you better watch out, well then, it's true that Wally has not had a beer, okay? So that's always going to work too. Careful though, okay? Because there are these sort of like invalid versions of these arguments that look really similar, but they're totally invalid. They don't work, okay? So for instance, affirming the consequent. This is going to be invalid. So if P then Q, you got Q, therefore P doesn't work, okay? Watch. It rained last night. If it rained last night, then the ground is wet. The ground is wet, so it rained last night. Is that valid? Think about it. Maybe somebody sprayed the ground with a hose, right? So just knowing that the ground is wet and knowing that if it rained last night, the ground is wet, right? Like those two things could be true, but the ground could be wet without it being true that it rained last night. So you can have true premises and a false conclusion. Or sorry, yeah, you can have true premises and a false conclusion, right? And that means it's going to be invalid, right? So this is no good, affirming the consequent. Watch out for that one. The other one that you got to watch out for, right, is denying the antecedent. That's always going to be invalid too, right? So if P then Q, not P, therefore not Q. Again, watch this. If it rained last night, then the ground is wet. It didn't rain last night, so the ground is wet. Again, this could be true, that if it rained last night, the ground is wet. That one might be true. And it didn't rain last night. That might also be true. But that doesn't mean that the ground's not wet. Again, there's lots of other reasons the ground could be wet. Somebody might have sprayed it with a hose, for instance. Okay? So those two things, they look really similar to modus ponens and modus tollens, right? But they're kind of like they're opposites, right? Affirming the antecedent is okay. Denying the antecedent, not okay. Denying the consequent, okay. Affirming the consequent, not okay. Okay? So notice that, right? This is a common mistake that people make. It looks kind of right, right? But it's just, it's not. It's not, it's an invalid argument form. Okay, here's another one that's going to work. This is a disjunctive syllogism. This one is fine. Okay, so you've got one that says P or Q, not P, so Q. It's called a disjunctive syllogism. A syllogism is just a kind of argument. Okay, disjunctive because it's a disjunct. You've got two options, either or, right? So either P or Q. That's a disjunction, right? So you've got P or Q. Well, not P, so Q. Okay, right? So either the Warriors or the Raptors will win the championship. The Raptors won't win, so the Raptors will win. Sorry, the Warriors won't win, so the Raptors will win. Okay, so notice this is valid, right? Because like if it's true that either the Warriors or the Raptors will win the championship, then it's true that like if the and it's true that the Warriors won't win, then it has to be true that the Raptors will win, right? It might. That's valid. Okay, again, it's not necessarily sound, but it's a valid form of reasoning, right? Notice, though, that there's a potentially invalid cognate for this one, too, okay? P or Q, Q, so not P, okay? So it's okay to do it as long as you're doing a not P or a not Q here in the disjunctive syllogism. It's not okay to affirm one, okay? And this is a little bit strange. Here's why, okay? Because it's not always going to work because sometimes you get disjunctions where they're not exclusive. Like if the Raptors and the Warriors won, they're exclusive. It has to be one or the other. But with lots of disjunctions, it could be true that both are true, right? So here's one, for instance. It'll be sunny or it'll be hot, right? It is sunny, so it won't be hot. That's not necessarily true. It could be sunny and hot at the same time, right? You could be saying something like, look, if it's not sunny, it'll at least be hot. Right? That's logically the same as saying it'll be sunny or it'll be hot, right? So see, like it's not sunny, so it will be hot. That works, right? Or it's not hot, so it will be sunny. That works. But it is sunny, so it won't be hot. That doesn't work, right? It's going to be sunny and hot at the same time. That's totally possible, right? It's just a weird thing about or statements. They logically sometimes work that way. So just in general, watch out for this, okay? And watch out for other people making them, and then see if their disjunctions are exclusive or not, okay? Because they're not always exclusive. So just in general, avoid that. This one, though, you don't have to worry. You're always safe. Okay? Okay. And then the last one I want to talk about is called a hypothetical syllogism. Okay, this one goes like this. If A, then B. If B, then C. Therefore, if A, then C. Okay, so watch this. If Steve comes, he's going to bring his no good dog. And if he brings that dog, I'm going to puke. So if Steve comes, I'm going to puke, right? Notice all we're saying, right, is that like if this thing happens, oh, shoot. If this thing happens, let's get the old pen. If Steve comes, that's your A. He's going to bring his dog. That's your B, right? And if he brings that dog, I'm going to puke, right? There's B again. And then we've got a C. So if Steve comes, I'm going to puke, right? So all we're saying is if this is true, then this is true. And if this is true, then this is true. And if this is true, so then that means if this is true, then this is true. Oh, it's so much easier to just look at and kind of grasp than for me to actually say it out loud. But I hope that makes sense, right? So that's a hypothetical syllogism. And again, that is going to be a valid form of reasoning. We're going to get to this when we talk about fallacies, right? Like there's other reasons why this doesn't necessarily work. but it's always going to be a valid form of reasoning. It might not always be sound, as usual, but it's always going to be valid, okay? So this is what I want you to do. Practice, okay? I want you to make an argument using each of the 4 valid forms we've covered. Affirming the consequent, affirming the antecedent, denying the consequent, disjunctive syllogism, and hypothetical syllogism, okay? So like do that in your notebooks or something, and practice that and before you take the quiz, okay? Make sure you understand each of these forms and maybe go over the weird invalid forms too. Okay, so I hope this has been helpful. Again, if it's not, you know what to do. You give me a shout, send me an email as it goes. Sound good? Thanks.